Life, Sentiments and Realities by Chris Uyi. Narrated by Adrian Galley. This is the first of a two-part audiobook recording. The second half can be found elsewhere on this site. Table of Contents. Acknowledgement. Foreword. Introduction. Chapter 1. Business. Chapter 2. Love. Chapter 3. Friends. Chapter 4. Family. Chapter 5. Solitude. Chapter 6. Patience. Chapter 7. Work. Chapter 8. Happiness. Chapter 9. As regards women. Chapter 10. Letter to Neka. Chapter 11. The rest of it. About the author. This book is dedicated to the Supreme Spirit, the Ancient of Days. Acknowledgments. I specially acknowledge and give endless thanks to my family, the Ibaze Orias, for giving me life and starting me on the path of knowledge and truth. I sincerely thank my mentor, Dr. Dayo Olomu, and also Reverend Craig Isa and Olaoluwa Martin Cole for the constant inspiration and light you have shone on my path through the years. Your support and belief in me has brought me this far. In the same vein, I thank my editors and advisors in the United Kingdom who painstakingly walked me through the process of bringing this project to reality. Finally, to all my friends and associates who've positively impacted my world, I say thank you. Also to my critics for making me better. I thank you specially for your time. Christopher Uyi. Foreword. Two striking and most life-changing observations about life and business from the book Life, Sentiments and Realities by Chris Uyi naturally caught my fancy. The first was his thought-provoking postulation. He discerned, I quote, "Our best plan is the plan made based on what we control and what is readily available to us. Experience has shown the wise that expected incomes most times remain expected for longer than expected. This is the reason I usually advise greenhorns to try to have experienced some form of lack before they live in plenty. For lack helps us develop needed strength, and we become more calculated when we start out with minimal resources. It is always better to avoid having excess cash when starting out in business and when in crisis, unless you have an inheritance to fall back on." End of quote. This is absolutely right. I quote again, "Man, know thyself is the eternal rule for a happy life. If you know how to work in a job, kindly choose a career path and be happy with an average life. There is a difference between your business, your job, and your calling. However, the truly great and happy are those who make the three become one. And when this is achieved, we must consciously disassociate ourselves from any friendly ties that we may have with the spirit of procrastination. It is our worst enemy and steals more from us than any of our staff can or ever will, because it steals our lives by stealing our time, and time is the stuff life is made of." End quote. This is most thought-provoking, a case of hitting the proverbial nail on the head. For me, as a peak performance coach and international motivational speaker, I can never emphasize enough to my audience the ills of procrastination and how it has destroyed many mortals globally. As one person rightly said, and I quote, "Procrastination never won a race, received a promotion, or changed the outcome of any situation." End quote. What is procrastination? It is the art of putting off, intentionally, the doing of something that should be done immediately. There is no value in procrastination, yet everyone does it from time to time. So the first thing I want to talk about when it comes to procrastination in our everyday lives is that it is devilish. I will be the first to admit that I have been guilty of procrastination several times. I have concluded that, quote, an ineffective plan executed today is better than a perfect plan delayed till next year. Don't procrastinate. Do it now. End of quote. Of course, not everything that is delayed causes real problems, but they certainly are examples of procrastination. All of us are guilty of procrastination in our everyday lives. For instance, many times we put off going to the doctor when we should, whether it be for a regular checkup or for a pain that we are experiencing. Many of us plan to build things or to go to certain places, but we always manage to find a reason not to do it. Sometimes we suffer great heartache because of procrastination. For example, some have wanted to tell their mother, father, or someone close to them how much they loved and appreciated them, but waited too long, and that person died before they had the chance. The same thing has happened to family members who were angry at one another, and then decided one day their differences were not worth being separated from one another. But the decision came too late, and one of them died without knowing that they had been forgiven. Procrastination has always been a problem with people, and in some instances it has cost them their lives, and even caused them to suffer defeat in battles they should have won. For example, an incident from the American Revolution illustrates what tragedy can result from procrastination. It is reported that Colonel Raleigh, commander of the British troops in Trenton, New Jersey, was playing cards when a courier brought an urgent message stating that General George Washington was crossing the Delaware River. Raleigh put the letter in his pocket and did not bother to read it until the game was finished. Then, realizing the seriousness of the situation, he hurriedly tried to rally his men to meet the coming attack. But his procrastination was his undoing. He and many of his men were killed, and the rest of the regiment was captured. The British ambassador, Nolbert Quayle, said, I quote, "Only a few minutes' delay cost him his life, his honor, and the liberty of his soldiers. Earth's history is strewn with the wrecks of half-finished plans and unexecuted resolutions. Tomorrow is the excuse of the lazy and refuge of the incompetent." End quote. Hence we see that procrastination can be very dangerous, as it can cost people their lives. So there is no doubt that Chris has done a yeoman job of collating these life-changing lessons and putting them in a handy format. The apt thoughts, philosophical teachings, random musings of sages and fools, experts and charlatans, statesmen and commoners, businessmen, youth, students, poets, lawyers, and so on, for our daily use, to guide our thoughts. In the book Life, Sentiments and Realities, you easily find the quotes and life-changing lessons you must apply in your day-to-day life to guide you like a torchlight on your path of life. In this collection, you have clear insight into Chris's deep philosophical findings of knowledge and the depth of life's many wells from which he has drunk, from west to south, north, and in the deep eastern blocks. To have combined quotes and works of several global icons, mixing their thoughts with life-changing lessons from the revered holy books, as well as words of wisdom from both the living and the dead, all that you can imagine, is not child's play. Though the book can be likened to an inspirational mini-success book, it is not your run-of-the-mill collection. The book vividly provides the context for which the thoughts were rendered on marble, and it readily challenges interested persons, students and scholars, etc., to further seek knowledge of life via projects of this noble nature. For instance, via this book by Chris, I know that, and I quote, "You can never be too wise to make a mistake," unquote. No doubt Chris, with this book, has proved himself as a worthy wordsmith set to explode in the literary world. You may disagree with some of his findings, but you cannot take away from him his combative philosophical thinking, and with this, his inspirational book, we now know better where he is heading. I am sure even generations yet unborn will find this book handy. Every sentence of this book is pregnant with information, and I enjoyed the mind-expanding experience of this exciting book. Dr. Dayo Olomu, Croydon, UK. Introduction. Sentiment. A view or an opinion that is held or expressed, an ideal expectation. Synonyms: point of view, way of thinking, feeling, attitude, thought, opinion, belief, idea, general feeling or emotion, exaggerated and self-indulgent feelings of tenderness, sadness, nostalgia. Origin: Late Middle English in the senses physical feeling, sensation. From Old French, sentiment. From Medieval Latin, sentimentum. From Latin, sentire, feel. Reality: the state of things as they actually exist, as opposed to an idealistic or notional idea of them. Synonyms: the real world, real life, actuality, fact, truth, verity. Origin: French late 15th century. From Medieval Latin, realitas. From late Latin, realis, relating to things. This book is the result of experience and meditation. It is not an exclusive treatise on the topics touched, but rather inspirational thoughts to help the willing soul with an open mind think and see for themselves through a colourless glass, untainted with the bias of their preferred sentiments. Quote, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." Unquote. Epictetus. Through the fire of passion and the bruises of disappointments, life constantly nudges us to reality, and its message is clear, that sentiments cannot survive in a world of reality. The biggest challenge of life is in knowing how to live. For entering existence was superimposed, but living is an art, and that art we must learn in order to be liberated from our self-imposed difficulties. Reality is burdensome to the undisciplined mind, and so they avoid it by constantly seeking fun and distractions, albeit living confusedly. As adults, we must train our minds to be watchful, thoughtful, and resolute. We cannot alter what is, nor shape people and events to our liking. Putting much effort into that is a sure path to frustration. Rather, we must set our minds to reconcile our actions to what is, rather than what we expect things to be. If life is a journey, like wise men say, just as you stay in the moment and keep abreast of the realities on your way, decisively maneuvering from danger and moving on to smoother terrain while keeping the ultimate goal of your destination in mind, so in the journey of life we must stay attuned and eternally vigilant to our immediate environment, and by all necessary means stay alive to reach our destiny. What sentiment does to us in the journey of life is like a man on a highway who believes the road ought to be good and constantly maintained by the government, and so drives recklessly. But the reality is that the road may not always be good, and impediments such as potholes, fallen trees, broken-down vehicles, stray animals, and armed robbers abound. To avoid his early demise and to successfully reach his destination, he must drive in the consciousness of the realities on the road, rather than in his sentiments. The consequence of losing touch with reality is always disaster. We must keep our final destination in mind, relinquish the moments of necessary stoppages, considering them not as delays but rather as needed rest to help us continue our journey with more zeal and zest. Then, most importantly, we must drive on the roads of our lives according to what is, rather than what we expect them to be, to successfully meander from danger. For only those who stay alive reach their destination. A pilot who has a sentimental attachment to the color black and decides always to push the black button rather than the instructed red button for a particular operation will definitely not have a safe flight. A child weeps in school because he cannot do his elementary mathematics correctly. But when it is mastered, all his struggles end. Now, mathematics is such an interesting subject, in that no matter what formula you apply, you will always get an answer. However, if that answer is the right one, that becomes the ultimate challenge. If your answer is wrong, shame and sometimes suffering follows. But if the winning formula is applied with the resultant right answer, happiness, fulfillment, and accolades follow. The right formula is what is, and must be followed to ensure the right ending. If your sentiments prefer subtraction to addition, and you subtract before you add, then your answer in an elementary mathematical equation requiring first addition then subtraction will be wrong, and your reward will be the necessary repetition, shame, and suffering that follows. Sentiments always fail. Reality is what is, and this is where your happiness lies. The examples above from daily knowledge and science, carefully observed, teach us the science of living so as to avoid suffering and disaster, and to aid us in achieving our destiny. Through my keen study of life, I saw it shadowed by anguish and people being burnt daily by the fires of disappointments, misplaced passion, misdirected goals, and broken dreams. I then applied my heart to search out the reason for these situations. I looked for the cause in things, but could not find it. I searched further in books, but it was not there. I looked for it in others, and then in the circumstances under which people suffer, but it could not be found. And then I looked within, and aha, there it was, the self-made cause, and with it the ever-effective remedy. I found that people had consciously chosen predefined principles and tenaciously held on to their unnecessary bias when dealing with issues that demanded an approach based on the realities on the ground, realities that would deliver their happiness and success without much rancor. So I desired in my heart to write a book that would help people of all standing, be they rich or poor, learned or unlearned, worldly or unworldly, to achieve and attain as they so desired. And the desire remained in me until it became fire shot in my bones, and this book came forth, which I now send to the world on its mission of emancipation and awakening. And just as the effective force of truth cannot be stopped, so I know this message will not fail to reach the hands and hearts of those who need it and await it with an open mind. Quote, "The man who views the world at 50 the same as he did at 20 has wasted 30 years of his life." Unquote. Muhammad Ali. 1. Business. When it comes to the true nature of business, we must downplay what we learnt in school and keep our eyes and mind open. Economists quote ceteris paribus, meaning all things remaining equal. But this, we know, is for us to pass our examinations in conventional schools. If we expect things to forever remain the same, then we have failed ourselves in the school of life by failing to understand the eternal truth that life is dynamic and change is the only constant thing in the universe. How can all things ever remain equal when things are controlled by humans? Humans, by nature, are fickle. You do not go to school to be a businessman. You do business to be a businessman. It is more profitable that we learn from a business mentor than from our MBA professor. We must keep our thoughts dynamic and evolve when necessary, because in business everything is fluid, except your personal interest and the next person's greed. A strong fundamental for our business success in reality remains its sales, numbers, and sales are dependent more on the expertise of the salesman than on the quality of the goods themselves, though good quality does make the job easier. The best sales strategy and the tenacity required to close a deal are acquired mostly from practice and self-determination, rather than from any course or certificate in school. That said, dealing with the good times in business is easy, and sentiments may carry us for a while. So I would not focus unduly on the good times. Rather, I would focus on the days when sentiments fail, and reality checks in and decisive thoughts and actions must be applied, or we sink. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, I quote, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy." Unquote. So your true business acumen and strengths are tested in the down days of business. In the same vein, the Proverbs of King Solomon say, I quote, "If your strength fails you in the day of battle, then your strength is small." Unquote. Now, strength is not developed in the heat of the battle. Rather, strength is developed in the days of peace. Therefore, the wisdom of age beckons on us to prepare for war in the days of peace. For just as the dark night has a guarantee of a bright day to come, so the peaceful times are preparation days for the certain war ahead. To the happy youths who have started business with sentiments, I advise that they listen to Niccolo Machiavelli, who says, and I quote, "Any man who desires to make an enterprise of goodness will surely come to grieve among so many who are not good." End quote. Even a charity or NGO will fail if it rolls on the wheels of sentiment. Sentiment is a sure catalyst for disaster. Therefore, in the midst of the boisterous storms of business that must surely come, your best option is to row for shore, face reality, and avoid all decisions based on sentiment. First of all, understand that you are alone. All you have is your strength and courage. You cannot rely on friends or associates at this time, so drop your pride and do not try to please anybody, unless giving to Caesar what belongs to him. Your reputation is already lost as a result of the business going bad, because, sincerely, you do not want to know what your friends and associates are really saying about you. So, I repeat, it is in your best interest to drop your pride, face reality, and stay in the moment. You are in business to make money, not friends, and to sell your products and not your soul. So think again, and act. You must steer clear from anyone who tells you not to think. For even the good book admonishes us that, I quote, "In the days of prosperity be joyful, but in the day of adversity, consider or meditate." Unquote. Your thoughts, however, must be strong and positive. We must never give ourselves over to our lower negative side of pessimism. It is a waste of energy to whine, because nobody really cares. We all have our issues, so deal with yours. I quote, "Confidence in an unfaithful man in time of trouble is likened to a broken tooth and a foot out of joint." Unquote. The Book of Proverbs. And I quote, "Most men will proclaim everyone his own goodness, but a faithful man who can find?" Unquote. The Book of Proverbs. From these submissions from the Book of Proverbs, it is obvious to the discerning mind that our best plan is the plan made based on what we control and what is readily available to us. Experience has shown the wise that expected income most times remains expected for longer than expected. This is the reason I usually advise greenhorns to try to have experienced some form of lack before they live in plenty. For lack helps us develop needed strength, and we become more calculated when we start out with minimal resources. It is always better to avoid having excess cash when starting out in business and when in crisis, unless you have an inheritance to fall back on. As said earlier, certificates hardly ever correspond with practical intelligence and wealth. Education only broadens our minds and should teach us to think for ourselves. Our score sheet at school hardly ever determines our financial balance sheet at 40. So we must consciously strive to know ourselves, judging without bias our weaknesses and strengths, thereby knowing our true worth. If this is carefully and sincerely done, many will find that they have no business in business. "Man, know thyself" is the eternal rule for a happier life. If you know how to work in a job, kindly choose a career path and be happy with an average life. There is a difference between your business, your job, and your calling. However, the truly great and happy are those who combine the three into one. And when this is achieved, we must consciously disassociate ourselves from any friendly ties that we may have with a spirit of procrastination. It is our worst enemy, and steals more from us than any of our staff can or ever will, because it steals our lives by stealing our time, and time is the stuff life is made of. Business gone bad is not the death of a parent, so you really do not need sympathizers. Rather seek solution-givers. As the good book says, quote, "In the midst of counselors there is safety." Unquote. This leads me to say that we should take all necessary advice, but think it through for ourselves. For everyone will give advice from their own perspective, imbued with a touch of their own experience and calling. A pastor will likely give you advice that is different from a businessman, and at times when advice is desperately sought, we must be careful with old-timers. Let the old-timers be a stabilizing factor, but not the determining factor in our decisions. Rather than hold on only to old-timers, we must seek new men with timeless ideas and balance our actions between our permanent values and the temporary situation. Haste should be avoided in decision-making, because business has been found to be just like candle wax, which, when it drips on you, never cleans perfectly if you rush to brush it off. But if you withstand the heat and let it cool down, it peels off nice and easy. So we must learn to be patient When dealing with pressures on the business front, you would do well to master these few points. Do not be in a hurry. Be patient. Master that which masters others. Control your emotions and your greed. Take only calculated risks. Follow the money trend. Never complain. Comply. Watch out for your spiritual counselors if you have any, for you might just end up taking impractical advice and giving your last pennies as penance. If your issues stem from betrayal, then watch your closest confidants. Your most dangerous enemies are those closest to you. As it is commonly said, if a thief responsible for stealing a thing is among the search party looking for that thing, it will take double effort to find it, and that is, if it will ever be found. Never borrow to pay debts. Rather borrow for a new and relatively sure business. Your creditors will not kill you. The transaction was simply questionable and nags at your integrity. If you have abused their intelligence, they will surely harm you, not for the debt you owe them, but for stepping on their pride. 2. Love. When young, we had expectations of love based mostly on Cinderella stories and the fantastic pictures that Hollywood painted and imprinted in our gullible minds. But through pain, mostly caused by curiosity, we came to learn the hard truth, that love is not that ecstatic feeling, but simply genuine and sincere care and appreciation. To truly love is to care deeply about and wish the best for the object of our fascination. That is why love today, from the initial picture of what is shared within the family and between a man and a woman, has graduated to a man loving his fellow man with sexual intentions, a woman desiring a fellow woman, a man desiring a dog, and many more distorted but present-day love realities. The appreciation from the bestowal here births true and sincere mutual respect and care, and leads to deliberate efforts to bring about the happiness of the loved party, regardless of what the object may be. Philosophically speaking, it is an error in judgment to believe that what makes us fall can make us better. Literally, falling leads to breakage, and that explains why most people that fall in love leave with broken parts, hearts. What makes us stand and grow must always be chosen, and that is what true love represents. For the care begets direction, advice, and effort to ensure that our objects or subjects achieve their destiny and can be their best. True love will always desire its object to be at their utmost best, even if that best makes them become better and more comfortable than us. This clearly explains why a man who envies his wife for excelling in her career or calling does not understand what love is, but is still adrift in a self-created and imposed ocean of infatuation. Parents do not show their children love by constantly saying, "I love you," crying, or other emotional discharges. The love of parents is shown by the constant desire and effort to ensure that their child moves forward on the best path, to ensure the well-being of the child, even to the point where the child is better off than the parents. If you are broken or knocked down by some fate, love picks you up and makes you stand, for the compassion of love gives strength. Quote, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life." End quote. John 3, verse 16, the Holy Bible. That remains the clearest definition of love. God so loved the world that he gave us an option not to perish. For love is always after the betterment of its object, not wanting it to suffer hurt or destruction. Hence, the true definition of love is that it is patient, kind, long-suffering, and it covers all sins. They say love is blind. Why then should we, in our sanity and sagacity, seek what cannot be seen? For we must constantly be on a quest for improvement, and that which makes us better and see clearer. The reality of the blindness of love that our sentiment holds is what continues to increase the divorce rate and cause many to be maimed in their matrimonial homes. For how can a man hit or hurt a wife he truly appreciates, respects? And how can a woman cheat on a man she cares about? For she must have considered his hurts were he to know about her despicable acts. It is true that love casts out all fear. Therefore it is also true that any relationship based on fear has lost all the ingredients for love. For fear will restrict evil for a while, but at the slightest chance of freedom, that spouse or child will do double evil to make up for lost time. Let us drop the search for a spouse that can exist only in our minds, for the perfect ones exist only in our small minds. Love is a choice. We must decide to find a real human being, though imperfect, and choose to care and appreciate them perfectly. In so doing, we key into the divine kind of love that never discriminates by physical appearance or worldly achievements. I have seen beautiful couples give birth to ugly babies, tall parents give birth to short children, and rich couples become poor. Life is fluid. Everything changes. Love who you have found unconditionally and live divinely. For if we must be gods as we were made to be, unconditional love is the true nature of God. When God was making the woman for man, his thought was not that he felt man needed to be loved, for God, in his infinite wisdom, knew that the true love anyone could ever desire or need could be found only in him, in God himself. God's purpose for creating woman, and hence the institution of marriage, was for companionship. I quote, "And the Lord God said, It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him." End quote. Genesis 2, verse 18. It is time we begin to rediscover the truth and know where true love can be found. A wise man once said, quote, "When the purpose of a thing is not known, abuse is inevitable." Unquote. Until we understand what love is, and we drop the Hollywood definition of it and gently begin to walk the path of companionship and respect, and make the unconditional decision to care about and appreciate the other, only then will our marital vow of, quote, "to love and to cherish, in sickness and in health, till death do us part," unquote, begin to be what it should be, rather than the bastardized state it is in these present times. We must also realize that it is impossible to love any other until we have found love within ourselves. Let us therefore seek to love ourselves first, and in so doing we can truly love our God, and, in the same way, love another. The divine order, which states that you should love your neighbor as yourself, holds a clear message when it says, "as yourself." This means that we must first love ourselves before we can love another as ourselves. If people will wake up to this truth, their hearts will not be in pieces, and the strongest building block of society, which remains marriage, will last forever. 3. Friendship. During childhood and as teenagers, we are afraid to be alone. We believe that those with the largest crowd have it all. This is true in business and politics, which are games of numbers. But the adult mind knows best the difference between friends and associates. 10 friends do not play together in 10 years. Successful people know to subscribe more to associates than friends. For friends will always take more from you than they give. The obvious reason is because they feel you owe them for friendship's sake. Relationships between associates are based on interest, and when we constantly bear in mind our interests and carefully pick associates with shared interests, we have a smoother and happier path in most of our endeavors. The key to successful friendship in adult life is to remain relevant. For if you are needed, even if you are in the farthest village, you will be looked out for. It is just as the saying goes, where the grass is green, the flock will be found. You could be in the center of the busiest city. If you are not relevant, nobody knocks on your door except your creditors. In early life, friendship is like family. We may be forced into it by virtue of the fact that people are our neighbors and we play together, or they are our classmates in school, and we go for breaks together when the bell rings, and many other scenarios such as these. At this stage it is worth it, because we really have little to lose. But in adulthood, we may have been betrayed at one time or another, but still not have critically learnt our lesson. Here is the truth. There is no betrayal unless there is trust, and if we still trust totally as adults, then we deserve every hurt. So when one experiences betrayal at 40, it is obviously a sign of weakness. Associates are not trusted, but everyone holds the bond to honor their words and agreements. If they do not, then we already know what to do, for it should have been well expected. If every house has 2 exits, then it is simple wisdom that we should always have alternative plans. When we are in chaos, it is best that we stick around those who have tied interests with us in the situation. It is never really worth telling a friend the truth of your situation. After all, they do not intend helping you. Every true friend will be ready to take a bullet for you, as long as there is no gun in the vicinity. Friends are only as loyal as their self-interest demands. As said earlier, it is profitable to take advice from others, but think for yourself alone. Everyone will advise you based on their own perceptions of the matter, but only you know the truth and where it hurts the most. That said, some are lucky to find true friendship in the course of life. However, in the wake of current strides and the scheme of things in today's world, harsh realities have proven time and time again that your spouse is not your best friend. And sincerely, that was never the plan. You certainly must be friends to be spouses, but I repeat, your spouse is not your best friend and so-called confidant. To think otherwise is simply to accept and live by a popular lie. Your spouse is your spouse. Your siblings are your siblings. Your priest remains your priest, and your friend, and your associates are what they are, associates. Each has their role, and those roles must never be mixed up. We end up in the mud when we burden someone more than we should. If our spouses become our associates or so-called best friends, knowing all on the home and business front, how do we protect ourselves and who do we turn to when they serve us the divorce papers? Funny, but true. Some associates are in ruins today because they gave information for associates to their spouse, and information for their spouse to the priest. It is good that we enjoy all the good times of friendship in our youth, and learn from the bad times, and then stick with the ties until the heat comes. When the heat comes, the ties fade away of their own accord. Now, after the heat is gone and the friendly ties are burnt, it is wise we drop unnecessary sentiments and reason in fairness and truth to ourselves that, if our friends cannot help us, then we should change our friends, and if our new friends still cannot help us, then we must be practical and forget friends. Love your God, yourself, and family. Make money, stay relevant, and whatever you have around you is as much as you can get. Let them call you their friend, but you know better. It is advisable, however, that we have as many people as possible call us their friend rather than their enemy, even if we have to buy them. Consequently, we must bear in mind that friends bought with money will sell us out to a higher bidder. One more reality we often fail to realize on time, but which everyone at some point comes to terms with is, I quote, "Your father's friends are your father's friends. Never expect any favors from them when your father is gone." Unquote. And I quote, "Few men have the natural strength to honor a friend's success without envy." Unquote. Aeschylus. 4. Family. Family is about giving your all and expecting nothing in return. It is the single and most important part of any individual's life. This explains why most of the important events in our lives are always tied to family. Our birth, past, present, future, and burial are all attached to our family. Some people, in their limiting beliefs and sentiments, think that friends are of better value than family because of the freedom they get from their peers. They see family values as outdated and burdensome, and prefer rather to live freely, disrespecting their elders and blaming parents for childhood traumas. But through the heat of setbacks with friends, especially at difficult times, then we begin to value family. Quote, "And a brother is born for adversity." Unquote. The Book of Proverbs. If we cannot rely on family through good times and bad, then we are more alone than we may have realized. Family loyalty must be 100%. No single member is above the family unit, and no outsider must be put above the family. Whatever happens within the family must stay within the family. The earlier we realize that the building blocks of family are not divided into old school and new school as we thought in our youth, the better for us and the fewer regrets we will have at old age. The hierarchy within a home should always be respected, but nobody, not even the youngest sibling or your own child, must be taken for granted. It is absolutely necessary that we take into account all emotions and temperaments within the family. This will lead to a more stable environment of love without rancor. Family is an indivisible unit. Hence, no matter the case, all arguments should be ended respectfully. From experience, I have carefully observed that in family, everything is pretty resolvable. Therefore, no matter the bitterness from an issue, one must never cut him or herself off from the family, because a stray sheep is easier to prey on. If a branch cuts itself from its roots, it has no future. Therefore, rather than stay in bitterness, it is wiser to let issues call for and teach more understanding, for that is the reason issues arise in the first place. It is also important that we address parental flaws in this way. If you were raised by tough parents or had a pretty unhappy childhood, you cannot totally blame your parents, and it is unfair on yourself to remain in self-defeating and limiting bitterness. It is only fair and much wiser that we acknowledge that parents, too, are human. We know that it is impossible to be perfect in this imperfect world, and they have likely done everything in our best interest. Hardly will any responsible parent wish his child evil. The realization of this will always make you forgive and respect them. A little caution from experience will teach us that, though family is the cornerstone of our existence and happiness, it should never be the cornerstone of our business. Instead, it is the other kind of family. Capiche? When it comes to family members needing money, it is best to engage in charity rather than lend them the money, because family and money do not mix well. Very importantly, there is always that special child in the family. Some call them the black sheep. For the collective good of the family, it is always preferable that we keep an eye on them. That is, if you are not the one. That child needs guidance pretty much all through their life. They are God-given burdens. Even if they have all the educational certificates and material achievements, they must still be guided to save them from mistakes that may affect the fabric of the family. Outside of these, we should hold on to our own family's underlying principles, for when it comes to family, the fundamental working formula hardly ever changes, but varies from home to home. One more point to be noted is that we really owe nothing to our in-laws until they are written in the laws. 5. Solitude. Those who have not harnessed their latent powers in the place of silence have no core, and the one that is without a centre has no balance. The one without balance is erratic and double-minded. The good book says, quote, "A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways." Unquote. Those who cannot be alone with their thoughts and hear the man within instruct the man without are not yet fit for society and cannot be trusted with any important role, for they will endlessly be catalysts for chaos. Being that they have no internal control, anything they are entrusted with to control will fall apart, reflecting their true nature without what they are within. As the book of Proverbs says, quote, "A man without control of himself is as a city broken down without walls." Unquote. We all know that any city without walls exists for an appointed destruction, for it can easily and will be plundered in a matter of time. In childhood, we fear darkness, silence, and solitude, believing that in the company of many there is safety. But life, just as the wise book teaches us, makes it clear to us that there is safety only among the wise. For, quote, "A companion of fools shall be destroyed." Unquote. From this, it is obvious to the discerning mind that it is better to be alone than to be in the wrong company. Solitude is the meeting place where illusions and sentiments meet reality. It gives us the time to distance ourselves from present activities and think objectively about the past and the future. In solitude, we recover strength, think clearly with minimal distraction, and gain perspective. It is best that we totally engage these moments as realistically as possible, absorbing the true nature of things and situations around us, and then balancing them with conventional wisdom and advice previously obtained. after which we must then gradually advance beyond conventional patterns of thought. This is called thinking outside the box. Events in life mean nothing if we do not reflect on them in a clear and unbiased way, and this remains the concrete reason why most people repeat their mistakes. One of the aims of solitary moments is for us to make war with ourselves, gaining virtues and defeating vices. It is in solitude that we find the place and time to remove the plank in our eyes, so we can see clearly enough to remove the speck in our brother's eyes without hurting them. Our failures and predicaments may sometimes be unrelated to external factors, and may be more of a bother created by the enemies within ourselves. It is in solitude that the poor mind, robbed by routine, attains the required emotional, mental, and spiritual temperatures for a more stable and successful life. Solitude is the place where we find the ladder to heaven, upon which we must climb to find peace, truth, and overcome pain. Every hero and prophet has once walked this path. If we continue to run from knowing the effective reality of ourselves, others, and our circumstances, preferring rather to soak ourselves in pleasures, we sooner or later will be forced into solitude, but likely at a very uncomfortable and unredeemable level. It is through solitude that we fortify ourselves against our true and ever-present enemies, which are sentiments and assumptions. The difference between a youth and an adult is that the youth depends on outward appearances, while the adult depends on inward realities. The path from youth to adulthood is in the lonely corners and the narrow, quiet ways of life. However, a person cannot constantly be in solitude, as solitude is not an end in itself, but the means to an end. Neither total solitude nor constant activity should be pursued in the real world. There must be a balance. We must therefore choose for ourselves a convenient hour every day to meditate, feed, and commune with our spirit, to gather and garner strength, wisdom, and light, to rightly see through life, and perform our daily activities with sublime dexterity and sagacity. At the gates of adulthood, we necessarily, though unwillingly, become more solitary, for the journey of destiny must be embarked on alone. The one who desires greatness must discover that quiet place where he seeks and finds. For there is a way to all knowledge, wisdom, truth, and all power, and that way lies not in the skies or in books or in anything else, but in ourselves. I quote, "He who has lost touch with himself is adrift on the ocean of life without rudder, chart, or compass, and he is on a sure path to disaster." Unquote. Chris Uyi. You have been listening to the first half of an audiobook recording of Life, Sentiments and Realities by Chris Uyi. Narrated by Adrian Galley. Copyright 2014. Chris Uyi. Production copyright 2023. Useful Stories. This is the first of a two-part audiobook recording. The second half can be found elsewhere on this site.